Welcome back, America. It's Hugh Hewitt live in Atlanta from the American Legislative Exchange Council. And I could do Old Home Week with the CEO of ALEC.org, Lisa Nelson, who I have never met, but I feel like I know because our Venn diagram is pretty complete, Lisa Nelson, whether it is the Reagan years or the National Review colleagues that we share in common. But that's not why you're here. So I'm going to go right to the heart of it. We could really do a parade of. She's much younger than I am, but she was a kid when I was an aging 35-year-old in D.C. But we're here to talk about ALEC, Lisa Nelson, because you now shepherd one of the country's most important policy organizations. Would you tell people about the American Legislative Exchange Council and explain how a Berkeley graduate ended up running ALEC?
Absolutely, Hugh. Thank you so much for having me on. I would love to spend a couple of hours with you just sharing notes. But happy to be here this morning and happy to be in Atlanta, Georgia for our 49th annual ALEC annual meeting. ALEC essentially is a consortium of state legislators from all over the country that get together and work alongside with employers and business owners, small business owners, large business owners, stakeholders in policy. And what we do is we develop and work on model policy that focuses on the size of government, limited government, free markets, and federalism, which is essentially pushing power back to the states.
So when people learn that you worked for Bill Buckley and you worked for Newt Gingrich, it kind of, the planets align. And then you went into the private sector, so you worked for businesses who have to deal with the government, and then you came back to head ALEC. 49 years is the key thing that you said there. ALEC is not new. ALEC has been doing this forever. And the mission is what? How would you say what the mission is?
Well, our mission is to help all Americans and to create policy solutions that help all Americans, and whether that's in their business enterprises with small businesses owners, or in education to make sure that their education for their children is proper, their health care to make sure that they've got proper health care. The mission is to make sure that policy solutions at the state level are factors and solutions that contribute to a better life for them.
Back in the days when Pete Wilson tricked me onto the California Air Quality Management District, and then Kurt Pringle tricked me into the California Art Council, ALEC started, they take care of state appointees.
Yep.
They would send you briefs. And so if you didn't know what you were doing, I walked into the AQMD with some regulatory background, but not air pollution. ALEC came to my rescue. And so you must have this vast treasure trove. I know you've got a board of directors, a board of scholars, but you must have policy wonks stuck into every corner.
We absolutely do. And after something was happening in the water 50 years ago because, the Heritage Foundation was started 49 years ago. Pacific Legal was started back then. And what we do is we create policy solutions, white papers, briefings for legislators, for county officials, for state and local officials that would offer them a roadmap. And some of it looks like a model policy that they might introduce in their legislation. I kind of liken it to a library shelf. We probably have over 900 policies sitting on the shelf that if you're a legislator and you want to pursue something in your state, you can pull that, pull that policy off the shelf, modify it so it fits and works with your state, but it gives you the guide rails if you believe in those principles of limited government and free markets and pushing back to the states.
The most important issue in America today is education reform of government-run schools. Arizona has done a bold thing. Ohio is in line to do it. Texas is thinking about doing it. Have you done a model code for people who want to do backpack funding?
Absolutely. It's Patricia Ruckers from West Virginia. She's the senator from West Virginia, and she developed a Hope Scholarship bill in West Virginia. She worked on it for about 3 years, making sure that she could bring together all of the interested parties, because that's part of the problem, is there's so many different people working on education and working in choice, the homeschoolers, the charter schools, the parochial schools, and then, of course, the public schools.
Now, Lisa, you're a parent. I'm a parent. My kids went to public schools in California, all three of them. They've all moved to Virginia. Fetchy Mrs. Hewitt and I have moved to Virginia. You're a Virginian. Glenn Youngkin and I spent a conversation in front of some conservatives last week, and I'm doing it again, on education. People who call ALEC, do you keep track of how many calls are coming in on education because the system is so badly broken?
Yeah, I mean, they're calling the 2021 and 2022 the year of education, right? And so much is happening. I literally was just with Ben Toma, the legislator, last night here in the hotel, who was the person that led the universal education bill in Arizona. So people are calling us and talking to us about what that solution is. When you have a model policy, it makes the job that much easier because within the ALEC structure, those policies have been vetted. Everybody has looked at it and kind of thought about what are the unintended consequences, what is going to happen around this. We want to support public schools, but we also want to make sure that parents have a choice for their child.
I'm sitting here thinking, this woman is so accomplished and you've done so much. Are you sitting on other boards? Does like every corporate board in America want Lisa Nelson to come and join it?
I hope so.
Okay. Well, I'm just saying, given your corporate experience, and which companies you work for? AOL?
I worked for AOL and then AOL Time Warner, and then Time Warner as it manifested itself, and then Visa, the credit card company.
So all through that private sector, and you chose to work for ALEC. You must believe, like I do, that the states are where it is at. That's where it happens.
I love what I am doing, working with state legislators across the country. These are the true heroes and real Americans who understand what's going on. There's something happening out there in the country right now, and people are waking up to the issues. I think when you see the crime on the streets, what's happening at the borders, what's happening in your education, you can't help but want to get involved and start to kind of take back the country.
Now,
so
everyone listening can go to ALEC.org. ALEC. For the Steelers fans out there, it's not ALEX. It's ALEC.org. ALEC.org. Download Rich State, Poor State, which is critical. Download fact-based, unfunded pension liabilities. I talk about it all the time. People nod out, their cars go off the road. But it matters, right? That is the big iceberg out there.
It is, and I think you're going to have Jonathan Williams on a little bit later in your show. He'll talk all about that. I call him my happy economist. He's absolutely delightful. And, our publications are, you were talking about it earlier, our publications, Rich States, Poor States, has been coming out for 14 years. Utah has been the number one ranked state for 14 years, and we currently have a little battle going on between Utah, Arizona, North Carolina, and Florida, which is exactly what we want. We want that healthy competition among states to be the best run, the most well-run fiscal state in the country.
Now, I go to Maine for the summer, and I was talking to a genuine craftsman yesterday. He's working on something for my wife, who I refer to as the Fetching Mrs. Hewitt on the radio show. And we got to talking about life in Maine and how they need Paul LePage to be elected because they've got to reverse the tax. And I said, or you'll turn into California and people will leave. What do you do about the legislators who are stranded in deep blue states?
Well, we don't forget about them. That's one thing. We actually have held a Northeast Regional Academy in Maine, and Governor LePage, when he was governor in the first time, actually invited us over to his mansion his house, so that we could talk to him about fiscal policies. He loves ALEC and would be absolutely part of our family. But we work with them. These regional academies are small, intimate groups where it's literally like for them going to school. We teach them about zero-based budgeting. We teach them about how to manage their budgets, how to set a budget that isn't a growth budget. We teach them about tax cuts and how they can cut spending and cut taxes at the same time, which is something I don't think the federal government knows how to do. They eat the material up. The minority members in the Northeast and in Maine, actually we've got delegates from Maine here. I should have them stop by.
And then you convene the Legion.
Yep.
The Legion of Legislators. The Spartans of the legislative world convene once a year. This must be like a relief. How much is just socializing with like-minded center-right conservatives and policy wonks, and how much of it is therapy? Because they're in Democratic states.
Absolutely. It's so funny when we put together these meetings because we have to create time for that networking and that shared kind of brotherhood, of policy solutions. When we get together, sometimes we have to actually shush the crowd when we have a main speaker just because they're so happy to be with like-minded people. So we absolutely make sure that there's enough kind of networking so that they can share. That's the beauty of ALEC, is they share what's going on. They'll talk about, this worked in Iowa, but it didn't really work over in Maine, for instance. And once they do that, they can kind of craft a policy that fits for their constituents and their communities.
My closest friend in the world, sadly a Democrat, Mark Guerin, runs the Harvard Kennedy Institute of Politics. And they always get the new congressman in for a couple of weeks of brainwashing at the beginning of their careers. When a new state legislator is elected, what does ALEC do for him or her?
We have a new Legislator Academy.
I was wondering.
Yep,
okay.
We do. And we actually get together twice a year. And on the even-numbered years, we get together in Washington, D.C. So this December, it's actually November 30th to December 2nd, we will be in Washington, D.C. And part of that meeting, it's called the States and Nations Policy Summit. So we bring together governors and legislators. But part of that meeting is a 1.5-day new Legislator Academy. And we will invite over 50 newly elected legislators. In fact, we're already identifying them now. In a lot of states where they might be in a post-primary, where the primary is actually the general, in a 70% district, so they're likely to get elected in November. We're identifying those legislators, and we'll bring them in, and we will literally immerse them in our policies. And it's education. It literally.
Do you recommend that they specialize or that they stay utility infielders? Do you recommend, okay, if your passion is taxes, do this. If your passion is pensions, do that. If your passion is social issues, do this. Or do you want them to be all-purpose legislators?
That's such a great question. We have legislators of all stripes, and I would say a couple of examples. We had a legislator from Wisconsin who was a nurse practitioner, and she came to ALEC, and she said, I want to be on the HHS task force. I want to work within my field. And then we had a lady who came in for education. She said, I know nothing about tax and budget. Can I sit on the task force that talks about taxes and budgets? And she ended up being the chairman of that task force after 8 years, Gail Bates out of Maryland. So, it takes all kinds. And I would say utility players are great because then they can engage on the issues when they get back to their state capitals.
Well, ALEC is important. People need to know about it. I'm so glad to be here. Lisa Nelson, thank you for getting up early. Your first meeting probably is until 9, but you're very early at the ALEC conference to kick off the Hugh Hewitt Show's coverage of it. ALEC.org. If you want to know more about Lisa, her bio is over at ALEC.org. Lisa Nelson, thank you so much.
Well, thank you very much. I've got something at 6:45, or 7 o'clock. So it's, I'm happy to be here, and I'm glad that you're going to be here all week visiting with our legislators.
Go for it.